They called them saviors, the last hope in a galaxy drowning under the Karth Dominion. But when Earth finally answered the desperate call for help, something unexpected stepped out of the void. Not shining heroes, not gentle liberators. What arrived were humans forged in the crucible of their own violent history. Soldiers who fought like storms wearing skin. Worlds expected miracles. Instead, they got monsters who smiled through blood, broke ancient empires, and asked for nothing in return. So the real question is, when the galaxy begged for salvation, why did Earth send its beasts? If you're already thinking, wait, what kind of story is this? Then stick around. This one goes places. And hey, if you enjoy deep sci-fi, powerful HFY moments, and stories that twist your expectations, hit like, subscribe, and share this video with a fellow sci-fi lover. It helps more than you think that in 01 in the galaxy truly believed Earth would come. To most civilizations, humanity was a rumor, a cautionary tale traded in dim starports and whispered across war-torn worlds. A young species, barely a few centuries into the void, yet somehow responsible for the only recorded defeats the Karth Dominion had ever suffered. Outsiders called them reckless. Some called them cursed. A few, usually veterans of battles they barely survived, called them the most frightening creatures ever shaped by evolution. But to my world, broken under the Dominion's fist, humanity was our last hope. For decades, the Karth had ruled with the cold precision of an ancient machine. They didn't invade like conquerors. They descended like a storm that never tired. City shields cracking open. Temples reduced to ash. Families taken. Anyone who resisted did not live long enough to resist twice. I was a healer once, before the Dominion shattered our identity. After the first year, I spent more time stitching wounds than treating illnesses. By the third year, I stopped counting the dead. When our leaders sent a desperate transmission begging Earth for aid, many of us thought it was simply an act of grief, a last impossible prayer. Why would an obscure world answer us when even mighty empires bowed to the Dominion? Why would a species rumored to be half myth risk everything for strangers? But then the sky changed. It happened on a day that smelled of smoke and rain. The Dominion had herded thousands of us into the central plaza, a demonstration of power they called a compliance gathering. Their overseers lined the edges, armored in obsidian plating, laughing at our fear. They enjoyed these rituals. To them, we were cattle learning our place. Then the alarm screamed. Dominion sirens were a sound everyone recognized, a wail so sharp it felt like a blade in the skull. But this time, it wasn't directed at us. The guards froze. Their helmets turned toward the clouds. Something had entered orbit, something big enough to warp every scanner on the planet. The first shadow fell across the plaza. A ship? No. A leviathan forged of black steel, descended through the atmosphere like a nightmare given shape. Nothing about it resembled the crystalline elegance of Elvari cruisers or the polished lines of Dominion vessels. Earth's flagship was brutal, angular, armored so heavily it looked like it wanted the universe to try and break it. As it passed overhead, sunlight died. Behind it came dozens more. The Dominion guards faltered. One even stepped back. I had never seen a Karth soldier step back. The fleet didn't drift gracefully into position. They slammed into formation, as if declaring that space itself belonged to them now. A roar of atmospheric thrusters shook dust from rooftops. Refugees beside me cried out and covered their ears. Then a single dropship broke formation and plunged toward the plaza. It hit the ground with a metallic impact that rattled the bones in my chest. The ramp hissed open with a cloud of steam, and for a heartbeat, the entire world held its breath. Humans walked out, not the gentle saviors we imagined, not ambassadors, soldiers. They weren't tall by galactic standards, but every movement carried a disturbing precision. Their armor was jagged and scarred, matte black except for streaks of white symbols that looked hand-painted. Helmets hid their faces behind predator-like visors that reflected nothing. The Dominion guards didn't attack. They hesitated, because for the first time in centuries, the Karth recognized an enemy that terrified them. The human commander stepped forward and removed his helmet. I remember the moment vividly. Pale skin, close-cropped hair, eyes gray and cold enough to freeze fire. He looked at us only long enough to confirm that we existed. But when his gaze shifted to the Dominion soldiers, something changed. A shadow passed across his features. Not anger, not hatred, but something deeper. A promise. "You hurt them," he said, voice unnaturally steady. "You enslaved them." He lifted his rifle. "That ends today." The Dominion laughed. Of course they did. They outnumbered the humans 5-1. Their armor was centuries more advanced. Their weapons could burn through tanks. But the humans moved first. No formation, no caution. They struck like lightning wrapped in muscle and armor. One soldier sprinted so fast his boots cracked the stone beneath him. Another vaulted a barricade, landing amidst a cluster of Karth and ripping through them before they could coordinate. Their weapons thundered, deep, bone-shaking detonations that turned Dominion armor into molten fragments. And when their guns fell silent, the humans kept going. One tore a Dominion trooper from his exosuit with his bare hands, tossing the metal shell aside like discarded clothing. Another absorbed a plasma bolt directly to the chest plate, staggered, and then grinned. An actual grin. That was the moment the Karth broke. I never thought I would live to see it. The ancient Dominion, rulers of countless worlds, turned and ran like prey. The plaza became a storm of screams and smoke as humans pursued them with terrifying efficiency. When the last Dominion trooper fell, the humans stood among the wreckage panting, armor cracked, faces streaked with soot and sweat. They didn't cheer. They didn't celebrate. They simply existed, like beasts that had been let off the chain for too long. One soldier turned toward us. His visor was splattered crimson. His voice came out muffled, but strangely soft. "Don't be afraid. We're here to help." But none of us moved. We had prayed for saviors. Earth had sent us something else. Hours later, I walked behind them as they pushed deeper into the city. Fire still raged. Dominion bodies lay twisted across streets. And the humans, these monsters with steady hands and cold eyes, moved as if they had done this 1,000 times before. One of the soldiers, a young man with dark hair and a scar across his cheek, noticed my fear. "I know what we look like," he murmured. "But trust me, the Karth fear us for a reason." I whispered before I could stop myself. "What reason?" He adjusted his gear and glanced at the smoking sky. "Because monsters don't stop." By nightfall, the world realized the truth. Earth had not sent heroes. Earth had sent the only creatures in the galaxy the Dominion could not break. And by dawn, everything was going to change. For the first few days, I stayed as far from the humans as possible. They moved through our shattered towns like walking storms. Efficient, silent, impossible to predict. You could feel them before you saw them, like pressure in the air before thunder strikes. They set up forward bases with unsettling speed, carving out pockets of safety in places that had known only terror. And yet, even as I feared them, something strange kept tugging at my attention. Their contradictions. Humans fought like creatures born for war, but between battles, they carried themselves with a quiet heaviness, as if every victory cost them something invisible. I learned this on the night they found me. A squad had taken over the ruins of our old medical center. Dominion troops had burned it to the foundation months before, but the humans needed a place for triage, so they repurposed it without hesitation. One of their medics, broad-shouldered, armored up to the neck, dragged me inside after discovering I used to be a healer. "We need you," he said, handing me gloves. "Your people have injuries our kits aren't calibrated for." I wanted to refuse. What could I possibly offer these unstoppable creatures? But then I saw one of them laid out on a metal slab. Blood soaked through the torn plating of his armor. His breathing was ragged, shallow. The medic's voice softened. "Please, help him. Human or not, wounded is wounded." As I worked, I realized something surprising. The humans trusted me instantly. They didn't flinch as I examined fractures or applied medication. In their endurance, it bordered on myth. The injured soldier grunted only once when I realigned a broken rib. "You people don't feel pain?" I asked quietly. "Oh, we feel it," the medic replied. "We just don't let it stop us. It was delivered without pride. No bravado. Just fact. As more wounded came in, both human and my own, I saw another side of them. These monsters held the hands of dying soldiers. They whispered comfort in languages I didn't understand. One hummed softly as she changed dressings on a child's shattered arm. They were ruthless killers, and yet, in these moments, they were unbearably human. Later that night, sitting near a crackling makeshift fire, I overheard them share stories. Not of glory, not of conquest, but of home. Beaches they missed, families waiting, meals they wished they could taste again. The quiet ache in their voices made my chest tighten. Reyes, the young soldier with tired eyes, caught me listening. "You're wondering how we could be like this," he said, leaning back against a broken pillar. "Well, we are out there, and what we are here." I hesitated. Yes. He didn't get angry. He didn't laugh. He simply nodded, as if he'd expected a question. "You saw us in the plaza. That wasn't skill. That wasn't training. That was instinct." He rubbed the scar on his cheek. "People think Earth made us violent, but Earth just made us adaptable. When something tries to kill us, we learn how to kill it faster." "But why fight like you enjoy it?" I asked quietly. Reyes stared at the flames for a long moment. "Because if we don't fight hard, we die. And if we die, so does everyone we're here to save." His voice cracked slightly, like something inside him was frayed. "We don't fight that way because we love it. We fight that way because we can't afford not to." That was the first time I saw it. The hidden truth behind their monstrous aura. Humans weren't fearless. They were terrified. Terrified of failing. Terrified of losing more people. Terrified of seeing another world fall like so many before it. Their brutality wasn't born from cruelty. It was born from desperation. Days turned into weeks, and I traveled with them through ruined forests and bombed-out cities. Every battlefield revealed another layer of their contradictions. I watched a human soldier crush a Dominion War drone with bare hands. Then, minutes later, kneel to offer water to an elderly villager trembling in fear. I saw a woman who had snapped a Carthage spine earlier that morning now laugh softly as she handed out ration bars to starving children. Their commander, Captain Hawk, was the strangest paradox of all. In battle, he was a force of nature, calm, ferocious, unstoppable. But one evening, while I treated a shrapnel wound on his arm, he sat perfectly still, eyes distant. "You're afraid of us," he said suddenly. I froze. Yes. Good." His tone was flat, not mocking. "Fear keeps you cautious. Caution keeps you alive." He tilted his head, studying me with those cold steel eyes of his. "But don't mistake us. We don't want to be here. We fight because if we don't, more worlds suffer what yours did." "How do you live with what you do?" I whispered. Hawk exhaled slowly. "We don't." That answer haunted me. Later that night, I saw him alone, staring at a small metal tag, a name engraved on it. He held it like something sacred. Then he closed his fist around it, as if crushing the memory would make the pain disappear. It didn't. A few days later, I witnessed something that shattered the last of my illusions. A human soldier, a massive man known as Braun, had torn through a squad of Dominion shock troopers during an ambush. He fought like an avalanche. He roared, smashed, ripped. It was horrifying to watch. But that afternoon, when our caravan passed through a burned-out village, Braun spotted a little girl crying beside the ruins of her home. Without a word, he knelt, dug through the debris, and found a small flower still growing through the ash. He gently wove it into a crown and placed it on her head. The child smiled for the first time since the occupation began. Braun smiled back. A monster in war, a guardian in peace. And it wasn't just him. Humans rebuilt walls around towns they passed through. They shared their limited rations with villagers before feeding themselves. They fixed water pumps, repaired roofs, and taught people how to defend themselves. None of this was part of their mission. They did it because their hearts couldn't stand seeing the helpless suffer. Reyes once told me, "We're not heroes. We're just what the galaxy forced us to become." By the end of the second month, something inside me had shifted. I no longer hid behind the medical tents. I no longer flinched at their weapons or their roars. These monsters who killed without hesitation were the same people who lifted fallen comrades with trembling hands. One evening, after a brutal skirmish, Reyes sat beside me, staring at his hands as if they belonged to someone else. "They call us monsters," he murmured. "Do you believe that?" For a moment, I didn't know how to answer, but he deserved honesty. "Yes," I whispered, "but you're our monsters." Reyes gave a quiet, broken smile. "Good enough." And somehow it was, because by then I understood the truth. Humans didn't bring horror to our world. They brought hope wrapped in the armor of nightmares. And the Dominion, for the first time in its ancient reign, was afraid. The first real sign that the galaxy was changing came quietly. Not in a battle, not in a grand speech, but in the way Dominion patrols began to disappear. Entire outposts went silent overnight. Scouting ships never returned. At first, we thought these were isolated incidents, maybe technical failures, maybe local resistance groups taking desperate risks. But then the humans started smiling, those dark, dangerous smiles that meant they already knew something we didn't. Because it wasn't a coincidence. It was them. Earth's soldiers weren't just liberating cities. They were dismantling the Dominion from the inside out, carving out pieces of an empire so old it had forgotten how to fear. Word spread fast. Across the stars, enslaved species whispered of black-armored demons, of the pale warriors who laugh at death, of Earth's wolves who hunted Dominion commanders like prey. Every rumor added another spark to a galaxy that had long been smothered. And then the sparks ignited. Rebellions that had been crushed for generations suddenly surged. With every human victory, another world rose. For centuries, the Dominion's power had rested on certainty, the certainty that no one could defeat them. But now, that certainty was bleeding, and it terrified them. I saw the change firsthand as we pushed deeper into the southern continents. The Dominion had once strolled through these territories like lords surveying their estates. Now, their banners lay trampled in the mud, their checkpoints burned. Their soldiers fled at the first glimpse of human armor. "Can they truly fall?" one villager whispered when we entered her town. Reyes answered before I could. "Everything bleeds," he said, "and everything that bleeds can die." The woman shivered. I understood why. They weren't just soldiers, they were reapers. The kind that came with purpose, not cruelty. But the humans didn't stop at dismantling the Dominion's control. They adapted their tactics with terrifying speed. One day, I watched a team observe a Dominion skirmish drone for 10 minutes. By nightfall, they'd hacked it. By morning, they'd turned it into a weapon that could bypass Dominion shields. The Karth had spent centuries perfecting technology. Humans needed a single night and a few angry engineers. "Your people learn too fast," I muttered as the repurposed drone followed us like a loyal hound. Reyes shrugged. "We don't have the luxury of learning slow." Their commander, Captain Hawk, led with that same relentless efficiency. He studied patterns, weaknesses, supply chains. And when he struck, entire battalions fell like dominoes. Once, on a fog-covered plateau, I watched him lead a small unit of 12 soldiers against a Dominion fortress that had stood for nearly 300 years. They took it in 40 minutes. 40 minutes. When the dust settled, Hawk simply said, "Next target," as if he hadn't just shattered a symbol of Karth immortality. The humans weren't fighting battles. They were tearing down the myth of Dominion invincibility brick by brick. And the galaxy was watching. One evening, as we camped near an abandoned mining hub, a group of alien rebels approached our perimeter waving makeshift flags. They brought supplies, food, medicine, ammunition, as offerings. "We want to join you," their leader said, trembling not from fear but from awe. "If Earth fights, the galaxy fights." Hawk nodded. "Then fight smart. Fight together. The Dominion isn't a storm. It's a machine. Break the gears. Make it choke." His words spread like wildfire. Within days, resistance cells coordinated with human strike teams. Within weeks, entire planets rose simultaneously. The Dominion began to panic. They launched counterattacks with a ferocity they hadn't shown in centuries. But it wasn't enough. The humans fought like a species with nothing left to lose. I remember one battle in particular, a skirmish in the ruins of a vast industrial zone. Dominion forces had cornered us, pouring out of shattered factories with heavy weapons. The air filled with plasma fire. My people screamed. Rebel forces were on the brink of collapse. But then the ground shook. Braun, towering, armored, unstoppable, exploded from the smoke like a beast out of legend. He swung an armored fist into a Dominion enforcer, sending the creature flying. Behind him came dozens of humans, charging with the kind of fury that made even battle-hardened rebels freeze. Braun roared, "Move or die." The rebels didn't move. They simply stared, mesmerized, until Reyes tugged one by the collar and shouted, "He means move with US." And the tide turned. Humans moved like predators. Rebels moved with hope. Dominion soldiers moved with fear. When the battlefield finally fell silent, I stood among the wreckage, stunned by the carnage and by what followed. Humans immediately shifted from killers to caretakers. They retrieved wounded rebels, gathered supplies, fixed broken generators. One soldier even climbed a half-collapsed structure to rescue a frightened pet that had been trapped during the fight. The rebels watched in disbelief. "You fight like demons," their leader whispered to Hawk, "but act like saints." Hawk wiped blood from his face and replied, "We're neither. We're just tired." Another truth I discovered during those relentless months. Every human victory cost them dearly. I saw them break down after losing a teammate. Saw them punch walls until their knuckles bled. Saw them sit in silence for hours, haunted by memories I couldn't see. They buried their fallen with rituals that blended pain and reverence. They carved names into metal plates. They drank to the dead. They promised vengeance in soft, trembling voices. Monsters don't mourn, but humans did. And perhaps that's what made them so terrifying. They carried their grief like fuel, turning loss into something sharp and unstoppable. By the time we reached the Dominion's central command complex on our continent, the legends had spread everywhere. The Karth had faced rebellions before. They had faced threats before, but they had never faced a species that refused to die. At the gates of the command fortress, Dominion officers shouted through loudspeakers, "Humans, stand down. You cannot win." Hawk simply adjusted his weapon and answered, "We don't need to win. We just need you to lose." Then he signaled the attack. The fortress fell in less than an hour. When the last Karth officer was dragged out, shaking in disbelief, he stared at humanity's blood-smeared warriors and whispered, "What are you?" Reyes stepped forward, wiped plasma soot from his armor, and replied quietly, "The reason the galaxy still has a chance." By the end of that campaign, the Dominion's grip on our world had shattered. Their supply routes were crippled. Their fleets were scattered. For the first time in millennia, their empire looked mortal, and the galaxy understood something profound. Earth had not joined the war. Earth had ended the illusion of Dominion superiority. The humans weren't just soldiers. They were a catalyst, a force that turned fear into rebellion, rebellion into war, and war into hope. And the Karth Dominion, once eternal, was finally beginning to bleed. The final battle did not begin with trumpets or speeches. It began with a shadow, the kind that swallowed the sky and made every creature on the planet feel small. At first, we thought the clouds were thickening. Then we realized the sun itself was fading behind something colossal. A Dominion dreadnought, not a ship, a floating continent carved from metal and nightmares. Even battered, even desperate, the Dominion still held horrors in reserve. Its hull bristled with cannons strong enough to level cities. Its gravitational core could crush entire battalions. For centuries, dreadnoughts had been symbols of absolute rule. When one descended, resistance died. But this time, the humans didn't run. They looked up at a weapon that could end worlds and smiled like they'd just been challenged to a bar fight. "Biggest prey yet," Captain Hawk murmured, wiping ash from his cheek. For the first time since the humans arrived, I felt true terror, not of the Dominion, but of what Earth soldiers were about to become. The dreadnought opened fire. A beam of obliterating white energy lanced across the valley, carving a smoking scar into the ground. Rebel forces scattered. My people screamed and dove for shelter. Trees vaporized instantly. Whole formations were erased. But the humans didn't scatter. They sprinted. Reyes shoved me behind a chunk of fallen masonry. "Stay down," he ordered, tightening his armor. "If this goes wrong, you'll know. It'll be very, very loud." "What are you going to do?" I gasped. Exactly what we were made for. As the dreadnought leveled its guns for another barrage, drop pods launched from the human flagship. Not dozens, hundreds. They streaked down like burning meteors, slamming into the dreadnought's hull with thunder that shook the mountains. The humans weren't going to fight it from the ground. They were going to board it. Even the Dominion hesitated. I saw it. The dreadnought's cannons stopped for a fraction of a second, as if the ancient warship itself felt fear. Then the humans breached. The dropship hulls exploded outward, spilling armored warriors into the dreadnought's corridors. Through burned-out windows and ruptured plating, we could see flashes of battle. Sparks, plasma bursts, silhouettes grappling in brutal hand-to-hand combat. The Dominion unleashed everything. Gene-forged abominations poured from hidden chambers, towering beasts with bone blades and shrieking skull faces. Autonomous war machines rolled out on spider-like limbs. Plasma storms cascaded through the corridors. The humans tore through all of it. Brawn was a living earthquake, smashing through creatures 3 times his size. Reyes moved like a phantom, flowing from one kill to the next. Hawk led the charge from the front, carving a path directly toward the core. Watching from the surface, we saw explosions ripple across the underside of the dreadnought like lightning trapped in metal. It wasn't a battle. It was vivisection. At one point, a massive Dominion war beast broke through the hull, roaring as it dangled above the valley. For a heartbeat, it looked like it might crush everything below. Then a human soldier dove onto its back, drove a blade into its spine, and rode it down into the earth in a shower of dust and flame. The rebels around me stared in stunned silence. "They're insane," someone whispered. "No," an older rebel said, shaking his head. "They're human." Hours passed. Explosions lit the sky in violent sequences. Flames spewed from rent armor plating. The dreadnought faltered, sinking lower and lower as systems failed. And then, a transmission crackled through every rebel communicator. Static, gunfire, heavy breathing. Then Hawk's voice. "Core reached. Charges set. Clear the blast zone." "Blast zone?" a rebel commander shouted. "The entire valley is the blast zone." Reyes' voice chimed in, calm despite the chaos. "Then run faster." The valley emptied in seconds. My legs burned as I sprinted across uneven ground. Behind us, the dreadnought groaned, metal screaming, fire bleeding from its wounds. Then the world exploded. A shockwave ripped through the valley, throwing everyone to the ground. Light brighter than a star swallowed the dreadnought as its core detonated. Flames tore upward, twisting into a tower of destruction that clawed at the heavens. For a moment, it felt like the sky itself was breaking. And in that horrific brilliance, I realized something. Humans weren't fighting to win. They were fighting because they had accepted they might not survive. They had become death itself. Not for conquest, not for glory, but because someone had to stop the Dominion, and no other species could stomach the cost. When the smoke finally settled, when the last echoes faded, the dreadnought was gone, reduced to burning metal scattered across the valley. But the humans, where were they? Rescue squads scrambled through rubble, calling out names. Hours passed with no response. I felt my chest tighten. Had they all? A cough crackled through the radio. Then a voice. "Someone get this damn thing off me." It was Braun. Cheers erupted. Relief surged through the rebels like a wave. One by one, battered and bloodied, the humans emerged from the smoking ruins. Reyes limped out last, half his armor melted, but smiling through cracked lips. Then Hawk appeared. His armor was shattered. His face was bloodied. His left arm hung uselessly. But his eyes, those cold steel eyes, still burned. I ran to him and helped him to his feet. He winced but didn't collapse. "You did it," I whispered. He shook his head slowly. "We all did it. Humans just carried the heavy part. I swallowed hard. You're not monsters. Hawk looked at the burning valley, then at his exhausted soldiers. Yes, he said softly. We are. But we're the monsters standing between the galaxy and extinction. Around us, civilians began to emerge from hiding. Parents carrying children. Elders leaning on makeshift canes. People who had survived horrors no living being should endure. When they saw the humans, bloodied, limping, half-broken, they didn't run. They bowed, one by one. An entire world bowed to the creatures it once feared. Reyes leaned close and whispered, almost embarrassed, "We're not used to this." "What?" I asked. Being seen. In that moment, I understood the terrifying truth. Humans weren't unstoppable because they were strong. They were unstoppable because they refused to let darkness have the last word. They fought like monsters so others wouldn't have to. They carried pain so others could feel hope. They walked through hell so other worlds could dream. The galaxy had asked for saviors. Earth had sent its monsters. But those monsters may have been the closest thing to angels we ever had.